So we're starting off on chapter 10, and
All right.
it is. Let me get a sip real quick. What a beautiful day.
Damn.
Let's begin. How to remove emotional scars, or how to give yourself an emotional facelift. This is chapter 10. When you receive a physical injury, such as a cut on the face, your body forms scar tissue that is both together and thicker than the original flesh. The purpose of the scar tissue is to form protective cover or shell, nature's way of insuring against another injury in the same place. If an ill-fitting shoe rubs against a sensitive part of your foot, the first result is pain and sensitiveness. But again, nature protects against further pain and injury by forming a callus, a protective shell. We're inclined to do very much the same thing whenever we receive an emotional injury. When someone hurts us or rubs us the wrong way, we form emotional or spiritual scars for self-protection. We are very apt to become hardened of heart, callous toward the world, and withdraw within a protective shell. You know, this is the shit we carry with us our entire lives. Like, you know, the funny story of the dude, he was told as a kid he had big Dumbo ears, and now he's super insecure about his ears for the rest of his life. May go to the extremes of getting his ears surgically pinned back, and that's all self-inflicted. A lot of us carry a bunch of these self-inflicted emotional scars, if you will, that hold us back in life. So next portion here, it says how emotional scars alienate you from life. Many people who have inner emotional scars have never suffered physical injuries, and the result on personality is the same. These people have been hurt or injured by someone in the past. To guard against future injury from that source, they form a spiritual callus, an emotional scar to protect their ego. This scar tissue, however, not only protects them from the individual who originally hurt them, it protects them against all other human beings. An emotional wall is built through which neither friend nor foe can pass. A woman who's been hurt by one man takes a vow never to trust any man again. A child who has had his ego sliced up by a despotic and cruel parent or teacher may take a vow never to trust any authority in the future. A man who has had his love rejected by one woman may take a vow never to become emotionally involved with any human being in the future. Who does that sound like today? Most of the guys online. A bunch of the manosphere content is consumed by a bunch of dudes that have been hurt by a woman or slighted in some manner, and they've built up that psychological scarring that they'll never trust women again, without knowing that they're limiting themselves to a good woman that may come by. As is the case of a facial scar, excessive protection against the original source of injury can make us more vulnerable and do us even more damage in other areas. The emotional wall that we build as protection against one person cuts us off from all other human beings and from our real selves. As we've pointed out previously, the person who feels lonely or out of touch with human beings also feels out of touch with his real self and with life. And there's a couple of sections here not as important, but it says things that we already know pretty much. Emotional scars help make juvenile delinquents. Emotional scars create a marred and ugly self-image, of course. And then he has 3 rules for immunizing yourself against emotional hurts. And it says 1, be too big to feel threatened. Many people become hurt terribly by tiny pinpricks or what we call social slights. Everyone knows someone in the family, office, circle of friends who is so thin-skinned and sensitive that others must be continually on guard, lest offense be taken at some innocent word or act. It is well-known psychological fact that the people who become offended the easiest have the lowest self-esteem. Now, obviously, what side of the political aisle is easily offended? And who happens to have the lowest self-esteem? Has no identity of themselves, is always in a spectrum of how they identify based on their feelings. These people have no ego, no self-esteem, and no sense of self-worth. No wonder they're offended by everything in the world. We are hurt by those things we conceive of as threats to our ego or self-esteem. There you go. Fancied emotional thrusts that go by unnoticed by the person with wholesome self-esteem slice these people up terribly. Even real digs and cuts which inflict a terrible injury to the ego of the person with low self-esteem do not make a dent in the ego of the person who thinks well of himself. It is the person who feels undeserving, doubts his own capabilities, and has poor opinion of himself who becomes jealous at the drop of a hat. It is a person who secretly doubts his own worth and who feels insecure within himself, who sees threats to his ego where there are none, who exaggerates and overestimates potential damage from real threat. And then skip further down, it says, healthy self-images do not bruise easily. The person who feels his self-worth is threatened by a slighting remark has a small, weak ego and a small amount of self-esteem. By the way, women can feel this stuff on you when we talk about like holding frame. being outcome independent or agreeing and amplifying terms like this when a woman like say shit test you in a club or at a bar or out and about if you're trying to get her number and she says something just to poke your ego. That's exactly the stuff this is describing. She will see on you if that poke was enough to rile you up, was enough to make you sensitive. Some guys react extremely negatively right off the bat when a woman just is testing your manliness. That's how they would say it. And the best answer to, these sorts of tests out in the wild when you're speaking to women at bars, clubs, wherever it is, man, just getting a woman's number is to be unfazed, to be outcome independent. Like her rejecting you is no big deal. It's like stepping on an ant. It's something inconsequential. When you have this like armor that's unpierced by any sort of comment or slight by the woman is when the attraction starts to build because it's attracted to be mentally strong like that. Most guys mentally break, unfortunately. They begin apologizing right away, or they think like they risk offending the woman if they say what they're really thinking. And so they're always like sugarcoating and bullshitting stuff. Women can feel and can sense that ulterior motive on a man. Yes, outcome independence, boys. The less you care, the more sure you are of yourself, the more confidence you have, and the more you operate like authentically, say what you mean what you say, is when people start to magnetize to you, especially women. Nobody wants to be around anybody with a weak ego, man or woman, period. It says, but we do not cure a sick or weak ego by beating it down, undermining it. Oh no, hold on. He is self-centered, self-concerned, and hard to get along with, and what we call egoistic. But we do not cure sick or weak ego by beating it down, undermining it, or making it even weaker. Self-abnegation, or trying to become selfless. Self-esteem is a necessary to the spirit as food is to the body. The cure for self-centeredness, self-concern, egotism, and all the ills that go with it is the development of a healthy, strong ego by building up self-esteem. When a person has adequate self-esteem, little slights offer no threat at all. They're simply passed over and ignored. Even deeper emotional wounds are likely to heal faster and cleaner, with no festering sores to poison life and spoil happiness. And another section I liked here is relaxing away emotional hurts. So he says, I once had a patient ask me, if the forming of scar tissue is a natural and automatic thing, why doesn't scar tissue form when a plastic surgeon makes an incision? The answer is that if you cut your face and it heals naturally, scar tissue will form because there's a certain amount of tension in the wound, and just underneath the wound that pulls the surface of the skin back creates a gap, so to speak, which is filled in by scar tissue. When a plastic surgeon operates, he not only pulls the skin together closely by sutures, he also cuts out a small amount of flesh underneath the skin so that there is no tension present. The incision heals smoothly, evenly, and with no distorting surface scar. It's interesting to note that the same thing happens in the case of an emotional wound. If there is no tension present, there is no disfiguring emotional scar left. It says, have you ever noticed how easy it is to get your feelings hurt or take offense when you are suffering tensions brought by frustration, fear, anger, or depression? We go to work feeling out of sorts or down in the dumps or with self-confidence shaken because of some adverse experience. A friend comes by and makes a joking remark. 9 times out of 10, we would laugh and think it's funny, think nothing about it, and make a good-natured crack in return. But not today. Today, we're suffering tension of self-doubt, insecurity, anxiety. We take the remark in the wrong way, become offended and hurt, and an emotional scar begins to form. This simple everyday experience illustrates very well the principle that we are injured and hurt emotionally, not so much by other people or what they say or don't say, but by your own attitude and your own response. So negative thoughts and emotions make you more susceptible to emotional scarring. Okay, if we take into account that the same exact joke that may hurt you or you may just let run off your shoulders depends on your emotional state, means that every single day when you get out of bed, you have to positively affirm yourself, not the dumb shit like manifestation boss babe. I mean, you have to manually hack your brain when you're starting to become doubtful, anxiety starting to build, or, whatever other negative fear, all the negative emotions that you're feeling, you have to cut them off right then and there and start to affirm to yourself, like, I am capable of this. I am chasing my goals. I am doing all the things I should be doing. I am worthy of all this. Sometimes you got to pick yourself up, self-esteem wise, because there's nobody there to pat yourself on the back but yourself. As grown adult men, there's nobody there to handhold us through all this stuff. You have to build a mental fortitude. So you have to get to the point where you recognize the negativity streaming through your thoughts, cut them off, start thinking positively, because something may happen throughout the day, guys, that usually rolls off your shoulder, but today is just not that day. If you've had days like that where you felt, fuck, today I'm not in the mood for shit, understand you're being taken over by that negative stream of consciousness, and you have to nip it in the bud right then and there, because unknowingly some stupid comment might hit you from somebody, and that just latches itself deep into your psyche, and you're never going to get that out of your head unless you do a lot of extra work. So just understand that there are points where you are mentally vulnerable depending on the stress in your life. And if that's the case, be mindful to not take things too serious and make it worse for yourself. Unfortunately, a lot of people in the world today live in very vulnerable states, mentally speaking. They're stressed out, trying to make it, pay all the bills, not end up homeless. Every day is a struggle. So they don't have much leeway there in terms of like a positive stream of consciousness. So every little thing would hurt them. Everything they perceive as a slight. Now, these people are inundated with negativity, and that's why they remain stuck in their position. It's hard to see through all this shit, man, unless you take control manually and detach yourself, like we say. Put the phone down, put the computer away, take some time off, go hiking, go out, go camping, go do something. You need to disconnect from your environment in order to see clearly. And it says relaxation cushions emotional blows. When we feel hurt or feel offended, the feeling is entirely a matter of our own response. In fact, the feeling is our response. It is our own responses that we have to be connected about, not other people's. We can tighten up, become angry, anxious, or resentful and feel hurt. Or we can make no response, remain relaxed, and feel no hurt. Scientific experiments have shown that it is absolutely impossible to feel fear, anger, anxiety, or negative emotions of any kind while the muscles of the body are kept perfectly relaxed. We have to do something to feel fear, anger, anxiety. No man is hurt but by himself, said Diogenes. So think about that, okay? It is absolutely impossible to feel fear, anger, anxiety, or negative emotions of any kind while the muscles of the body are kept relaxed, guys. And then the next part here says, thought control brought these people new life. At Shirley Center, Massachusetts, results attained by group psychotherapy surpassed results obtained by classic psychoanalysis, and in a much shorter time. Two things were emphasized: group training and thought control and daily relaxation periods. The aim, according to the study published in Mental Hygiene, was re-education intellectually and emotionally in order to find a way into a kind of life that will be fundamentally successful and happy. Patients, in addition to intellectual re-education and advice on thought control, are taught to relax by lying in a comfortable position while the director paints them a pleasant word picture of some placid, calm outdoor scene. The patients are also asked to practice relaxation daily at home and to carry the calm, peaceful feeling with them throughout the day. One patient who found a new way of life at the center wrote, "I had 7 years of sickness. I could not sleep. I had a hot temper. I was a miserable person to live with. For years, I thought I had a mutt of a husband. When he came home after a single drink and was perhaps fighting the craving, I would get excited and use harsh words and drive him to a spree instead of helping him in his fight. Now I say nothing and keep calm. That helps keep him, and he and I get along well. I was living my life antagonistically. I exaggerated little troubles. I was at the point of suicide. When I came to the class, I began to realize it was not the world that was wrong with me. I am now healthier than ever before and happier. In the old days, I didn't ever relax, even in my sleep. Now I don't bustle around as I used to, and I get the same amount of work done and don't get as tired as I used to." All of this shit is self-inflicted, guys. When you're feeling sad, self-inflicted. When you're nervous, when you're scared, all self-inflicted. All negative emotions stem from a stream of consciousness in your brain that's most likely not even rooted in the real world. Like, you have nothing to be afraid of, nothing to be anxious about. You most likely already have the answer. If you're preparing for an interview at a job, if you did your due diligence and prepared, there's nothing to be nervous about. If anything, you should be excited at the new opportunity. A job interview shouldn't make you nervous. A date shouldn't make you nervous. These are all positive things. These are great. This is your life moving forward. But some people turn into nervous wreck. Some people bail and don't even show up at all. They'll ghost or flake or think they're not good enough. They convince themselves they're going to fail. They show up an absolute mess psychologically to whatever, the date, to the job interview, to whatever it is in life that you're trying to do. You have to control all of this, man, day in and day out. It's never going to stop. There's no magic pill where you're going to overcome all this and then every time you wake up, it's all good. This is just human nature. Once you understand it's a battle you're going to have to practice being good at, make it as effortless as possible, you'll understand that this will be till death, and that's okay. That's okay. And it's also okay to fail. Not every every day will you be perfect and catch yourself thinking negatively. But just recognize that you have these moments of weakness and always strive to make them appear less and less in your life. No one's saying be perfect, guys, and don't beat yourself up. Again, that's another way you lose everything is you attempt something, it doesn't go as planned, and you start to beat yourself up. There's a lot of dudes undergoing the Spartan challenge and they'll fail on something minute, dude. Like maybe they screwed up eating, or maybe they jacked off or played video games, or whatever it is. A myriad of things that you have to do in the Spartan challenge, and they're not consistent with it. And they'll absolutely give up on the entire challenge. They'll feel like complete failures, like they couldn't even do this. They're capable of nothing. I'll give up. For what? Why do you beat yourself up this way? Where does this internal voice come from? This is what meditation and what journaling helps with, man. Identifying these thoughts, where they stream from. What part of your childhood does that come embedded from? And then you start to unwind all this shit, and hopefully those voices become less and less and less to the point where they're manageable and not out of control. And then it says, forgive yourself as well as others. Not only do we incur emotional wounds from others, most of us inflict them on ourselves. We beat ourselves over the head with self-condemnation, remorse, and regret. We beat ourselves down with self-doubt. We cut ourselves up with excessive guilt. Remorse and regret are attempts to emotionally live in the past. Excessive guilt is an attempt to make right in the past something we did wrong or thought of as wrong in the past. Emotions are used correctly and appropriately when they help us to respond or react appropriately to some reality in the present environment. Since we cannot live in the past, we cannot appropriately react emotionally to the past. The past can be simply written off, closed, forgotten, insofar as our emotional reactions are concerned. We do not need to take an emotional position one way or the other regarding detours that might have taken us off course in the past. The important thing is our present direction and our present goal. Keep your eyes on the prize, always. We need to recognize our own errors as mistakes. Otherwise, we could not correct course. Steering or guidance would be impossible, but it is futile and fatal to hate or condemn ourselves for our mistake. And it says, you make mistakes. Mistakes do not make you. Also, in thinking of our own mistakes or those of others, it is helpful and realistic to think of them in terms of what we did or did not do, rather than in terms of the mistakes made us. One of the biggest mistakes we can make is to confuse our behavior with our, quote, self. To conclude that because we did a certain act, it characterizes us as a certain sort of person. It clarifies thinking if we can see that mistakes involve something we do. They refer to actions, and to be realistic, we should use verbs denoting action rather than nouns denoting a state of being in describing them. For example, to say I failed, verb form, is but to recognize an error and can help lead to future success. But to say I am a failure, noun form, does not describe what you did, but what you think the mistake did to you. This does not contribute to learning, but tends to fixate the mistake and make it permanent. This has been proved over and over in clinical psychological experiment. We seem to recognize that all children in learning to walk will occasionally fall. We say he fell or he stumbled. We do not say he is a faller or he is a stumbler. However, many parents do fail to recognize that all children in learning to talk also make mistakes or non-fluencies, hesitation, blocking repetition of syllables and words. It is a common experience for an anxious, concerned parent to conclude he is a stutterer. Such an attitude or a judgment, not of the child's actions, but of the child himself, gets across to the child and he begins to think himself as a stutterer. Look at that, man, programming your kid to fail. His learning is fixated. The stutter tends to become permanent. Sheesh. According to Dr. Wendell Johnson, the nation's foremost author or authority on stuttering, this sort of thing is the cause of stuttering. He found that the parents of non-stutterers are more likely to use descriptive terms. He did not speak, whereas the parents of stutterers were more inclined to use judgmental terms. He could not speak. Writing in the Saturday Evening Post, Johnson said, slowly we began to comprehend the vital point that had been missed for so many centuries. Case after case had developed after it had been diagnosed as stuttering by over-anxious persons unfamiliar with the facts of normal speech development. The parents rather than the child, the listeners rather than the speakers, seem to be the ones most requiring understanding and instruction. Dr. Knight Dunlap, who made a 20-year study of habits, their making, unmaking, and relation to learning, discovered that the same principle applied to virtually all bad habits, including bad emotional habits. It was essential, he said, that the patient learn to stop blaming himself, condemning himself, and feeling remorseful over his habits if he were to cure them. He found particularly damaging the conclusion, I'm ruined or I am worthless because the patient had done or was doing certain acts. So remember, you make mistakes. Mistakes don't make you anything. And that's where this chapter ends. That's like a great part.
So I hate to keep beating the mountain biking scenario
No,
over and
please.
over, but so I've got the same guy that I've been trying to convince to go to a park. Sat there and kept telling himself, he sucks, or he can't do this because of wet leaves. When you were saying, or when the book was saying earlier about how being in the negative mindset, he actually quit riding for
No way.
because he went out. Yeah, he went out with a couple friends of mine, and it had rained and it was in the fall. So there's wet leaves and they're traps. Like they'll grab you and throw you right off. And he had wiped out once and he got laughed at.
Mm.
But because we had progressed into actually jumping and hitting bike parks, he had already told himself, I'm not, I can't do that. That's not me. That's not me. So when he wiped out and they laughed at him, like they laugh at everybody,
Right.
he took it all to a whole nother level, like of butt hurt. Even though, because I remember showing up that day later on to, where the jumps and stuff were at. Oh, hold on, my earbud fell out. And he came up to me and he was all pissed off. He was like, these motherfuckers talking all this fucking shit. And he just like went off on a tangent. And I'm like, what the hell happened? He was like, I fucking wiped out the leaves and fucking laughed at me. And I'm like, no. And he was like, yeah, well, they fucking crashed twice, like one into a tree. And I'm like, so? And what was their reaction when that happened to them? And he just kind of stared at me blankly. And I'm like, they laughed at each other, right? Or laughed, made fun of themselves. Like, yeah, okay. So why all of a sudden is it so much more detrimental when it's you? Because you've convinced yourself you're inferior to everybody else now. And he literally quit writing for probably a year after that.
Wow, really? Holy shit.
And like I said, it's been 2 years. I've almost got him convinced, kind of, but not really. But I've almost got him convinced to just go to a park. Get over He's also a guy that I just got a job here where I work. And he kept telling himself, oh, I'm just a grunt. I'm just a grunt. I can't do computer stuff. He's like, I'm not good at that like you are. Bro, I didn't know any of this shit until I started. I knew none of it. All the computer skills that you think I have now came from working here. I learned them on the job. You will do the same. So I am kind of proud of him for actually following through with the interviews because he was an anxious mess through that. And I'm like, why are you nervous? Dude? Just fucking show up and be yourself. So he sat through 2 group interviews, made it past those, then made it past the final interview, got hired. And the first day he was here, it was so much computer stuff. I can't do that. I'm just a fucking grunt. I'm just a grunt. I can't do this.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Day 1, bro. I told you everything that was involved in this position. And you said you wanted to get out of your old job because it was too physical. You're getting older, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And so then he's like, well, I'm not doing as much physical stuff here. Yeah, I told you. You said you wanted to get out of that. You're welcome.
Wow.
So it's been about 2.5 weeks now, and he's actually slowly started to acclimate to it. I don't hear him saying as much that, I'm not a computer guy anymore.
Yeah.
But it's that mindset. You keep telling yourself what you are or what you aren't. It's all in your head, man. I mean,
it is, man. And you see how much
it's
we all do. And you see how much it's holding a man back, like just thinking of himself so negatively. Like, man, the guy has no self-confidence whatsoever. And his ego is so fragile, like he can't even enjoy riding because he's worried.
He's got potential. Yeah. It's like,
but he's so worried about what everybody else thinks and to not be perceived as weak because he perceives himself. Yeah. He perceives himself as weak and he can't allow everybody else to see that because he has no confidence in himself. So the dude stopped himself from enjoying something he already was picking up and liking, biking. Imagine you.
I will give it to him that he did actually start going to the gym.
Well, that's good, man.
But then it was hilarious because he was like basically just punished himself. Like he just went in there just to beat the shit out of himself at the gym.
Well, that's one way.
I'm like, all right, well, I mean, at least he did something else physical after he stopped riding.
Yeah.
It just baffled me. I guess because then there's no competition. They're just doing it on his own.
Yeah, it's a self-improvement thing, really, by yourself. So doing something with the group changes the dynamic on a lot of things.